Hi. So I'm Katherine.
Oh, just two seconds, Katherine. I'll introduce you. I think that I just want to go onto the page.
Okay.
And just double check. It does say we are live. We are live. Hi, everybody. This is Nick from Retribe. Welcome to the What's on It Elephant and Castle Facebook page. We're here with Michelle from Retribe and also Katherine Trigg, who I'm so excited, Katherine, that you are here today. We've tried to get you on a few times in the last couple of weeks. But I feel like in this 45 minutes that we have together, we would be able to do probably about 3 hours, because you are such an interesting lady. I've only got to know you a little bit, but I'm really looking forward to exploring the fact that you are an artist, a designer, an advocate for men, women, children with regards to anti-domestic violence. You're such an interesting lady, and like I say, I'm really looking forward to talking with you over the next 45 minutes with Michelle. Can you give just
make no judgment on my teeth?
Can you just give? Okay. Can you give people just a little brief introduction to who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are today?
Okay. So very quickly, born in the Congo. Lived in Hong Kong, brought up in Hong Kong till I was sort of 18. Had no concept of racism or, we were brought up as one. Lost my father very young when I was 9. So that was very tough. And my mother worked very hard to sort of raise us all, but she was pretty much having her life and we were left to sort of bring ourselves up. When I came back to the UK, I did my sort of degree in fashion, and actually they were just brilliant, heady days in the 80s, going off to nightclubs, hanging out with Boy George, Visage, and the whole kind of 80s blitz scene, which was brilliant. People like Sue Tilley, we're all still very much in contact. And I think it really was such an inspirational fire, in the 80s, actually. When I look back on it now, at the time, you're not quite sure because things were so different, but you could really be creative and express yourself. So there were no boundaries. And I think that, coupled with my childhood of basically bringing myself up, anything is possible in my head, creatively. I went on sort of became a stylist because I realized, designing, which is probably my strongest point, really, an artist, designer, textile designer. But I sort of realized I hated pattern cutting. I did, like a sort of placement when I was at university, and I walked out sort of in the first week and thought, I can't do this. And I found myself a job, in that placement doing PR. And it's when sort of fashion PR was quite new as well. There weren't many sort of PR companies before that. So that was quite exciting. And I was a booker for a stylist. She was probably one of the first stylists in London in this agency, this PR agency. And I just thought, that's great. She's basically out there designing without having to make everything or get someone to make or do the pattern cutting. And she gets paid a lot of money. So I thought, it's a brilliant job, and I loved it. So I went straight into that, and I very quickly got an agent through a friend photographer that I worked with who really believed in me, Chris Kramer at the time. And my agent was Carol Hayes. She's huge now still. Lovely, lovely, wonderful woman. So I sort of, and that was it. And I ended up working, from people like David Bailey, John Swannell, Patrick Litchfield, some, Lord Snowden. I mean, just big names, as well as, it was just great, complete freedom, creativity. So that was sort of my, early part. But on top of that, I was just working constantly, Mail on Sunday, Vogue, just all the nationals, all those. It was just great, really working hard. But I did meet my first husband there, who was a photojournalist for the Mail on Sunday, which I think we'll get into later, probably, because that was the father of my first child, but sadly violent. So that was a bit of a shock to my happy little life, you know, that full of being able to go over all my boundaries. So I suppose from there, I basically ended up having 4 children. I moved to the middle of nowhere in Wales, which was a sort of love-hate relationship. You know, it was really tough coming from Hong Kong, London, middle of nowhere. And, you know, the nearest supermarket was about an hour's drive away. You know, it was tough, really, really tough. I still actually have that house, and now I absolutely love it. I can see everything about it is so different now, you know, having that space, that freedom again. But I think in many ways, being out there, I was creating because I was having children. So I was still creating in a different concept. But still, it wasn't, I mean, they're always enough, your kids, but you know, I still needed to do more. So I brought about a brand. We'd been going back to LA quite a lot, and I saw some things out there that I thought, you know, I had 3 boys, 1 girl, and I felt like a lot of the boys' stuff was really dire back in the UK. You know, you couldn't get them funky little clothes. I mean, we're talking early 90s. And I saw this company out there where they were designing their fabrics, printing them, over dyeing them, and that was quite exciting. So when I came back, you know, from one of these trips, I thought, that's it, I'm going to start a kids range. And I actually had on my doorstep Sir Bernard Ashley, who was Laura Ashley's husband, and he'd bought his daughter a printing company out literally 10 minutes from me in Wales. How odd is that? It was just, you know, it was all too good to be true. So I started designing. My first one was a duck, like this little ducky print, and I still love it. So I started designing those, getting them printed. It was really exciting when they were coming back, you know, this print on this fabric. And then I very quickly started getting orders with Harrods, Harvey and Harrods. So I sort of started my link back to London, you know, which was great. And from that, really helping to inspire my kids, because now they lived in the middle of nowhere, I wanted them to have opportunities. And at the time, everyone around us were farmers, which is great, but we're not farmers, you know, so that's a whole new level that I can appreciate, and it's hard, but you know, we're not. And so I had to, I think pretty much I spent, you know, a very long time driving up and down the motorway for my daughter to go to Royal Ballet. She was in senior, you know, Royal Ballet, and that was every Saturday whilst probably breastfeeding the youngest, you know. And then my eldest son, helping him with his career, with his film, and using quite a few of my early contacts to help him, because he's a director, the eldest one. And then, of course, my other son, Kit, is this brilliant guitar player with his own band, which is really successful. So helping him, you know, driving him to, you know, London. We had some guitar stores. I'm talking fast. I hope everyone can keep up. It's a lot to take in, isn't it? I realise
it's a big story.
I'm thinking, I know I'm missing massive chunks here, but you know, to try and condense all that into one. But they were my priority. So to enable them to have, you know, the opportunity to really flourish as human beings in what they want to do. I did homeschool for a while, and it wasn't really out of choice. It was more, they were Welsh speaking schools, you know, and I love the Welsh, but we're not Welsh. And for me, their primary language had to be English, you know, really. So a little bit of that was tough, but other than that, they did go to Welsh schools, and they were wonderful. But really to help them have, you know, without moving to London, to give them those opportunities, you had to travel. So, you know, I spent a lot of time doing that, as well as bringing about my brand. And that was, you know, really nicely successful. I had Disney come to me and asked me if I wanted to do a dual brand with them. And at the time, I thought, this is it. You know, Disney have come to me. It's just going to go crazy. But Disney, basically, they license everything. So, you know, it's not your golden ticket to anywhere.
No.
It's actually a massive learning curve. You know, I don't want to squash anyone's dreams. I mean, I love Disney, but working with them is a whole nother level for sure. But it really teaches you a lot. You learn a lot about safety aspects with clothes. You know, basically you need the weight of a Land Rover to pull a button to make sure that's safe. You know, so there are a lot of quite fascinating things you learn. And that was really successful. But basically my job was to act as a halo brand and catapult Disney into a high-end brand. And I did that. So I would take my prints, and I had like access to the back of all of Disney, so I could take any print I wanted and redraw and make it sort of look, you know, antiquated, can't say that word, aged,
vintage,
kind of, yeah, I suppose so, to you know, sort of readdress, you know, I could recolorize it but also redraw and add things of my own if I wanted pots and pans putting in there, for example. So that was really exciting. So I developed my own Disney prints. And I got them into Harvey Nicks, I got them into Harrods, I got them to Fred Siegel in LA. So I did my job. But I realized my brand was I didn't want it to become known as the Disney brand, even though it was a high-end brand, because they can just whack up your license fee and then you're bankrupt. So I pulled away from that now. I love doing it, but I pulled away because you end up more or less working for them, really. And so I'm sort of enjoying sitting back right now and thinking what direction. I've done some sort of wallpaper samples, wallpapers, bedding. So I'm quite excited about that, which I think is the next route. So that's
and last night, and last night you were art directing on a set as well with your family, so it's amazing. But I'm really interested to know, you know, you've literally got, you know, the 80s, the 90s, the millennial, the last couple of decades. Like you brand a lot, you span a lot of decades. So you've seen an evolution of art and the expression of art from kind of like I don't want to say the hedonism or anything like that of the 80s, because it was really this hedonism of the 60s, and I don't really understand that era. But there was a different time in the 80s to where we are now, and I'm wondering, like, the expression of art, how you've seen it. I'm really interested around the youth and how you've seen the youth express their way through art, and then this last lockdown, and how it's kind of evolved for you and what you've been able to observe over the decades.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. So for me, I think because I got 3 boys, I really wanted to make sure that they were, you know, not just knew how to behave, really, not just with women, and they are staunch feminists. So I think it must have been about, when did I do it? I don't know, 2017, I decided to do a master's in fine art alongside my work. And I think I thought I was going to go in and paint, literally, but I didn't do any painting. It was all philosophy. And I did quite a lot of work on something called the Woman's House, which, if anybody, most artists will know, sort of artists like Miriam Shapiro. So in the 70s in the States, I don't know if have you heard of it, Nick? So
yeah, when we last spoke, you told me about it, so I looked it up a bit. Yeah.
So it was brilliant. I thought it was such a lovely thing to do. So back in the 70s, some feminists, you know, artists collective got together, and they, you know, they managed to get this empty house, and it's, I can't remember whereabouts it is now. It's literally in Hollywood somewhere. Amazing house. And they basically went in and just took over areas. So even if they took over the garden, a cupboard, you know, the kitchen, whatever, and they just, did their sort of art installation on how they saw feminism back in the 70s. And if you look at that, if you Google it, it's really sweet. The stuff in there is, obviously it was huge then, but when you look at it now, it's like they never let any men go into it. They sold out. It was just women only, which, says a lot about our times and how far we've come now. On top of that, when did I do? I did a year's senior fashion lecturing at the UCA University. And that was an eye-opener because, again, I was sort of teaching these very young, sort of 18-year-olds. And the whole year was incredible because they were still, I mean, what was funny is they were sort of dressing as kids from the 80s, and that is their 50s. So when I was at university, we were dressing like the 50s, thinking this is great. So that was quite an eye-opener to think their 80s, is my 50s. But watching that progression and really very sad. I had so many children telling me, these awful stories themselves, and a lot of self-harming. Quite an eye-opener, actually, how many kids on there were so fragile, actually. And it's a tough one because, you're not allowed to tell parents, and these are serious issues. So that was quite an eye-opener, actually, how many kids really need, they're just bombarded with stuff. And, again, you blame the social media, but yes, because, if you took your phone off yourself for a day, you know what it's like. At first you fight a little bit, and then you love it, and you go back to, you haven't missed much, really. You can live without it. So that was quite an eye-opener. But then going back to this woman's house, from when I studied that master's, I wanted to do my own woman's house, for other artists to really see where we were now in comparison to that. And that was brilliant. So I managed to get this house off this guy that was going to knock rooms down. He bought it, to turn it into flats. Amazing house. We were so lucky. Opposite Victoria Park in London near Hackney. And we just basically, I had this big collective of artists. We went in and we took over rooms, cupboards. But equally, I had men, I had sort of trans, gay artists, because that's what feminism is. Basically, it's everybody plays a role in it. It's not, it shouldn't even be a word. It's like we're all part of this. It's very simple. You're either nice or you're not. It's so ridiculous, everything else. But it was fascinating to see. And even my youngest son, who was 17, actually he was 16 then, he's 18 now, he did something on, the Alabama abortions in one of the downstairs toilets. Fantastic installation, absolutely brilliant, with some Tupac lyrics all over, and all these different ages and different, just different artists coming together with their piece, whether you were my sort of age, whether you were really young, we all had something to say. It did all relate to domestic violence or some form of abuse. That was the point as well, to highlight that these things still happen. And that is one of the saddest things, that I have this one artist, she's phenomenal. And she did this massive tapestry, like the old Home Sweet Home tapestries. Do you ever remember seeing? They're very old school. But it was basically, just these pictures of abuse, and even a dog sort of doing things on the lawn. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. The whole thing. I mean, I had my friend Jo Wood came, and she's got lots of stories of domestic violence. Her daughter has, it was cathartic, brilliant, but really showed you that people are alive, awake. There was some people coming to see it. It was quite underground. We just had one sort of opening night, and we just had it open 1 week. But we had a lot of men in there, quite sad, saying they just couldn't believe that this sort of behaviour was still happening. it was good. Yeah, really good. So we are looking to do another one. It'll have a slight twist on it, but you know, my part in it was I mean, you can Google this. I'm sure it's somewhere. We've got an Instagram page with it, Women's House London. But my part, I wanted to sort of play homage to the original Woman's House. So I had a sort of pink kitchen, which is what the original was, although she had pink boobs on the ceiling. But mine was very much about my own situation of domestic violence. So I had a sort of horrible big knife there, and you know, that was my part. And again, very cathartic, really, for everyone. So I don't know, does that answer that question? I've got off a little bit on a tangent, but more or less.
Michelle?
There's so much there that I want to tap into, so much there. Thank you for sharing all of that. I mean, I can resonate with a lot of what you just said in terms, I lost my dad as well, very young, I was 10. And understanding what a woman goes through when she's raising 3 kids, and that whole journey in its own, with the domestic violence in there, with having to, you know, build your career. And one of the things that is so inspiring when you're talking is the energy that you have to do what you do, and the creative flow that you have that just comes in and that you're still running with is like, I can feel it from here. You know, we're not even in the same room, and I can feel it and it's touching me. Is there any kind of guidance that you would give somebody that is in that kind of situation where it can be really hard to pull yourself up and to be inspired in that way, to keep going? And you've done it with your children. So your children have all got creative bugs by the sounds of it, and they're doing amazing things. So how do you break the cycle, break the pattern, and feed that through? What's your guidance around? I know that's a big question, but do you have any kind of talk on that side?
I think recognizing where a lot of this comes from. So, for example, just for me, it was very clear the way I was brought up. My siblings, you know, it was a very dysfunctional house because my mother, really, she never really wanted kids. So when she was left with us, she was in Hong Kong, and it was a party town. So she was fine. As long as she fed us, she was going out. And my siblings were just left, and they were older. So my eldest brother would sort of bully my sister. The other brother would bully me. So, you know, it started very young. And I think a lot of that was pleasing. If I just pleased people, I'd be safe. And if I just did as I was told, I'd be safe. So even as a small child, you know, my brothers, who incidentally still bully me to this day, or try to, you know, and, you know, I don't allow it now, but it's taken me really a long time to get to that point, because they've always got that link straight to your heart, you know, just because of who they are. And so recognizing where a lot of this stems from, always knowing, you know yourself, if you're a good person, you're not a good person. And I firmly believe that you're born knowing right or wrong, but it's just how you're guided as you're being nurtured. If you're not being nurtured properly, you have to learn it all through your 30s till you finally get there. And so for me, I didn't have that nurturing. So it was better for me to try and please, just, you know, Katherine, do this, I do it. But when things got so bad, my first husband, I had my son, you know, and it was, he held a carving knife at our little boy, and, you know, in between what he was doing to me. And it was that defining moment that, you know, he needs his mum. He's, you know, I'm going to be dead. And so having the strength to look at your child and to work out that, you know, I don't know what the percentage is offhand, but and I don't know if it's boy or girl, but, you know, it's known that a little boy, if he sees his mother being hurt, he can go 2 ways. He can either be on her side, try to help her, defend her, you know, go down that route as he grows up. Or he looks at her and he says, you're too weak to look after me, you know, because you can't look after yourself. And that, I think, that has a lot of impact. And for me at that time, thinking that my son would look at me in that fashion, that you can't take care of yourself, you know, how are you going to take care of me? So therefore they go on and become an abuser because, you know, and you're not breaking the cycle. But really, I think as a mother, you know, having the, you know, just looking after that little child or those children and knowing, I don't want them to do this. Don't want them to go on and do this. I don't want them to hurt another human being, another woman, you know, or man, really, whatever it is. And I think it's the courage of that conviction of saying, you know, no, I'm a good person. These kids are going to be great. These boys are going to know how to treat women, you know, or this girl is going to know how to treat men. And that's it. The education starts there, and it starts with us. It starts with parents, really. And I think just knowing that behavior is wrong, and it is wrong. And just because we may feel insecure and we're not worth it, yeah, hit me because I feel like I don't deserve things. No, that's just wrong. You know, we know it's wrong, irrelevant of how we've been brought up, that someone has pushed us, bullied us, told us to do this, do that. No, we know really it's wrong. They shouldn't be doing that. We didn't get out. We had kids, you know, so now we owe it to those kids, right? I mean, that's it. So I think anybody in that position, look at your child. They will grow up. They won't thank you. You know, they won't thank you. They won't thank you anyway. They just, I don't think, you know, they'll always find something wrong. But, you know, look at that child. That's your child you've created. And every parent, surely, they want the best for that person so they can have an even better life than you had. Really, we all want that. We want our kids to get the best opportunities, you know, the best life they can lead, be the best person they can be, which I think is what we want, you know. But we have to be selfless because that's the next generation. You know, we need to eliminate, we need to re-educate, and there is no place for it. There's just no place for it. Does that help?
You know, since we've spoken, like, you know, I'm exposing myself more and more to Twitter feeds of advocates of domestic violence, lawyers, other survivors. And you know, like, I'm a recovered alcoholic, and there was times 5 years ago when people would say to me, Nick, just stop drinking. And I'd be, it was like, I wish I could. And it's this thing of like, with not just women, but people who are victims of domestic violence, people just say, well, just leave, you know, just get out of it. And then people who are not victims of domestic violence, who have not seen domestic violence, have a hard time comprehending why someone stays in those situations. The narcissistic, coercive, controlling behaviors that a person can put on one another. Like you said, how your brother can still pull your heart.
Yeah.
When literally I could sit and talk to you and say, Katherine, but you're what? You don't let other people do those things. And I think this is the one thing that maybe if you could explain a little bit more about coercive control. There's obviously the physical aspect of domestic violence, but the one aspect that people really have a hard time understanding is that controlling behavior, that narcissistic tendencies, how people can use language to control.
That is a tough one because, so sadly, I went from, you know, one terrible situation straight to another terrible situation that I misread, and I think I romanticized as some hero that was going to make everything better. And it was a long marriage, but actually, I think I mean, I go into situations with an open heart. I don't judge people, and it's already too late. You know, I'm in there with people, and then I find out, oh, you know, you're that person. So I think the biggest lesson for me came after the breakdown of my second marriage, which I eventually got out of, because it was a whole different abuse, coercive, controlling. He had guns. I had no means to finances, and I was out in Wales, middle of nowhere. So it was really tough. And he was a very dark person. And actually, you could read him like a book, but I never took the time to even think about, you know, personality disorders or anything. I just was busy raising children, you know, just looking at people going, well, just do the right thing. Just be nice, you know. And I'm married to you, just be nice. I mean, so that for me, the more I started to try to understand some behavior that he did. So he basically, when I said I couldn't do any more with him, I had to get out, and I had to, and we all had to. He was abusive to the kids, but he did hit them, you know, but we're not going to go into that right now because this is you know, so it's pretty heavy going. But at the end of the day, I sat outside these school gates and I was trying to understand just his behavior, because it was so cruel. Because I had no means to money, I had no joint bank account, I had no savings. You know, we had lots of money, but I couldn't access a penny. And I just, from one day to the next, I suddenly was doing anything, cleaning toilets, doing anything to get even £10. And all the kids were still living with me in London. I had to go and get housing benefits. You know, I had to do anything I could because we were going to be homeless. I couldn't access money. And it was just cruel because my youngest suffered this. I thought he had Sever's disease. Soon as the doctor, she said, no, it's ill-fitting shoes, which seemed Victorian. And it was just because I couldn't afford to get him shoes, you know, in this day and age. And so I decided to really, you know, I was angry, but I was, you know, still going through this ridiculous first year of separation, crying and thinking, surely he's going to do the right thing. You know, he's got to, 29 years of marriage. But no, he didn't. And the reality check there was, I remember sitting outside the primary school reading all this stuff about a psychopath, a sociopath, you know, narcissism, and understanding all of it. And then even going, how do you get revenge on a sociopath? And not that I'm not revengeful, but in that heat of the moment, how do you get revenge? You can't. I mean, that's it. You can't. So for me, I think trying to, you know, spend more time with people, trying to understand who they actually are. Now, you can have psychopaths that are actually very innocent. They know they are. They know they have to put a mask on to do something that other people do. I mean, there's a famous author that wrote a book about psychopaths, and she said, unfortunately, you know, if somebody gets knocked over in the middle of the road, I know to run over there. I know to put the mask on and do what everybody expects me to do. I know not to kill because I'll go to prison, but she can't feel, and you can't blame her for that. So, you know, even psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, you can't do anything about it. You just have to recognize it. And if you are happy to love somebody who can't feel some of the, you know, if you're the other end of the spectrum, and sadly I am, I don't think it's always a great thing. You know, I'm a total empath. I just soak it up. You know, whereas the other end, they could do this stuff and you can't even blame them because they just, it's like the Grinch. They just don't have the physical capability. So the best thing you can do is take care of yourself, take care of the people you love, you know, and get back up, get on with your life. But don't wait for that person to come right. They don't have the capability and you can't blame them for it. So it's a no-win situation, you know. There's a really good ancient prayer, a meditation prayer called the Hoponomino. I never say it right, but it's something like that. Lots of O's and a P and an H. And it basically is just a little mantra. It sounds crazy, but I swear to God it works if there's a God. And it's just, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you. And it doesn't mean I've done something wrong. But by doing this mantra, everything goes to negative. You know, you go just back to there. So you can't blame anyone. You know, you can't blame yourself. You can't blame that person for doing those hideous things. you know, and it's quite sad really, because you kind of feel like, oh, what can I do? Well, take care of yourself, take care of your kids, you know. So going back to what you were saying originally about, you know, how to, you know, really survive with these things, recognize it, you know, always work on yourself. We have to always work on ourselves, don't we, to make sure we're always doing the right thing by the right people. But I think more importantly, starting to set our own boundaries, which is something I've never done. You know, I've always let everyone walk all over me. I've always given my last bit of thing. And I think that is a tough one, you know, finding those boundaries is probably what we should be working on, I think. That kind of helped.
I love the reference to the Ho'oponopono healing. It's something that's really powerful. It's something that we've done, Nick, together when we've done some group meditation stuff, and
I love it.
Really powerful.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, thank you for bringing that into this space. That's a lovely exercise. I would love to ask you, moving through. So, firstly, just say thank you for being so honest and so open, because I'm a firm believer of when you realize something yourself, when you open it, you realize it for the whole world and for everybody else. It makes it easier for everybody else that's after you to express those feelings and those emotions. So thank you, because that's a brave thing to do, to go out there first and say it. And it being so close to my heart and my own family, on a personal level, I deeply feel that appreciation. But also as moving through into more of your career and your creative stuff, as a female, grew up in the 90s, kind of like early millennial.
Look too young.
But a lot of my friends have, and this is something I've considered and struggled with, and I've given up on now. But I have a very little fashion sense. I don't, you know, I don't. I'm quite creative.
I've got nice, relaxed shirt on.
Please, this is as far as it goes. You know, when you look on social media, you said about social media earlier. When you look on social media and you look at, you know, different men and women in, you know, and how they dress and how they express themselves, there's two types that really stand out to me. And one is when you're replicating something else to look like something else, which is the mask. And one is just pure, this is who I am today, you know. And I think that's really hard for people to find these days. How can people express themselves through arts, through dress, through different creative ways that really taps into who they are authentically, rather than a copycat image because they feel they need to and put that mask on?
So I think if you wake up in the morning and you make yourself feel like your life is your own movie, your life is your film, how do you want to feel in your film? How do you want to be perceived in your film? You know, none of us really know when we're going to be here, what, you know, when we're not going to be here. And I think every day you don't have to feel every day, I need to wear something, I need to look like this, but just imagine this is your film. You know, it's like we've got this lovely friend. It's one of my daughter's friends. And she looks, and she always feels, when you're with her, you feel like she's just stepped out of some, I don't know, Audrey Hepburn film. There's something about the way she lives her life, like my life's just a film, you know, this is what I do today, and this is how, and I think that is a really great way to think about, you know, your life and the way you move forward. It doesn't matter who you are, but if you were to be played back at some point, do you always want to be, you know, this drab person always in beige wearing your, no, because maybe in your head you're not that person. You know, maybe you don't want to do what you think everybody else wants you to be. It has to be you, because it's like if you were to write your own novel, you know, you've got to put all that stuff in there that you don't really want to say, don't you? You have to, because no one's going to read it. They want to read what you're really thinking. They want to see the dirt. They want to, you know, we all do. And I think it's the same with your life. Some days you might just want to be, you know, wearing boring, whatever. But who you are inside, you're so relaxed and happy because you're in your little film, you're going to look great. Everyone's going to want to talk to you. I mean, you know, I love fashion, and even yesterday on the shoot, we had some of these, some of the singers sort of posse came by. They were so cute, they were like real fashionistas. It was great seeing them. One had like a little crocheted sparkly beanie hat on and sparkly pink things on the hair, and I love it. I just, I think everyone should be exactly who they are. Don't be scared, or don't feel, and you know what, you might see some people that just look so together. I mean, all my career I've always felt, I've got wild hair, as you can see, and I used to try and straighten it, make it look a bit more, well, it was dark obviously, straighten it, make it conform a bit, keep it a little bit more manicured. But no, this is what I was given. I mean, I think we just need to, it's corny, but I suppose really learn to love ourselves. Go, this is what I have, that's why I'm not dyeing my hair. I miss my dark hair, but
it looks fabulous.
I am.
Great. I love it.
So I mean, I wish more people would do it so that women don't feel these constraints, and the same with men. So many more men are dyeing their hair, and I think, oh, it's a constraint. I think men look great when they're silver. They're way more handsome. I don't know why, but they are. I think that's.
I'm really trying. I'm trying.
Get it silver. No.
This is it. I can't. This is my hair.
It's more lovely to have something, that you wash, nurture, and look after. So that even if it's your hair, you're not by putting dye on. I feel like I'm putting some, for me. I'm not saying, but for me, I feel like that. And I feel like I want to nurture it, really. And maybe that's what we need to do with our sort of clothes. If we nurture ourselves, it doesn't matter what we put on, really, does it? Really, if you're inside feeling good and happy about yourself and in your little film, it's okay.
Katherine, have you ever heard of Joseph Campbell?
Yes.
So as we're kind of wrapping up our time together, it reminds me your story and what Michelle just alluded to as well, and what your daughter's friend is about being the the movie star of their own life, and Joseph Campbell being the hero of your own life. Become the hero of your own life. And you certainly are a heroine, and I only admire you and respect you, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you more and being able to meet you face to face. But I think what you really said about how you talked about psychopaths and perpetrators of domestic violence, whether they're men or women, they're sick people. And I think that if we start to look at the whole situation of domestic violence and with compassion and understanding that we need to support victims, but we also need to treat the cause.
Absolutely.
And I think this is something that we would love to be able to talk to you more about. We do have that movement started that I've talked to you about. Gender is the new tough.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I think that this is a way where men can actually, if a man has heard this today and has felt some need for violence as an outlet towards somebody, then we can create a space for them to come and talk, because I think that that is the root of the cause. Just like many of the movements out there, creating support is needed, but we need to get to the cause and eradicate it. And I think that that's where we people like yourself can lead a movement to change. We're just kind of wrapping up now, but what's the next coming out of this lockdown? You must be excited. I know you're an energetic woman with lots of plans. What are your plans over the next year? What are you going to be doing? When are you going to come to London for a visit?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm always in and out of London. I've got another big shoot, I think, next week. Possibly getting married, maybe doing that in July. That was cancelled because of COVID. So a nice party there. Working on my Airbnb in Wales, growing lots of veg. I've got a new vegetable plot where I am now. But also bringing about this next woman's house. I think that's going to be really exciting. And working out what other angle as well. We may have more sort of paintings, which is really hard to paint domestic violence. So that'll be quite interesting. carrying on with my brand, hopefully, with bedding and wallpaper. I've got too much on, actually. That's what I've got.
Right.
And growing
Sounds
my
amazing.
vegetables.
Michelle, do you have a final word?
Oh, it's such a pleasure. We could have been here for 3 hours, Nick, as you said in the beginning. Absolute pleasure. What a wonderful journey and story. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And we must talk.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm coming to Wales.
Great. Oh,
Katherine, we've been doing these talks for a year now for the Elephant and Castle community. This particular one has had some very heavy subject to it. So if anybody out there has heard anything that has maybe triggered them or kind of made them feel a little bit uncomfortable, please, Katherine, is it okay if I put your contact details
yeah,
in the
absolutely.
yeah.
Definitely.
I know you do support a lot of people with regards to anti-domestic violence, so we'll put any links in the feed. If anyone needs to reach out and talk to anybody about any of the subjects that have been talked about today, but also really looking forward, Katherine, to your expression of another woman's house. Hopefully that can come up soon. And please, when you are in London, I'm just in Soho, so look me up and we'll go for a coffee outside.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful.
Thank you. And
thank
thanks
you all
everybody at the
you
What's on It Elephant. And thank you. Michelle, we've got a workshop this Thursday at 11. The link is already on the Facebook page, and this one is going to be a monthly roundup, right?
Yeah, so a monthly wrap up. So just looking at the last month and what we might want to invite in through May. So just to check in.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks everybody. Thank you, Katherine.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.